now. So good evening, members of the Book Club of California and guests. Welcome to the Book Club of California's presentation for Wednesday, November 9th, 2022. I was just remarking that the last time we were here, I believe, was in February 2020, before everything shut down in March. So it's been quite a long time, but we're delighted to be back here in Pasadena for our monthly series of programs. So you can mark your calendar now. It's the second Wednesday of every month. We'll be doing a Southern California program, largely here at the Blinn House, Pasadena Heritage. So you can join us for future programs. Tonight's program is titled Cut, Fold, and Repeat, a pop-up adventure with Matthew Reinhart. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director for the Book Club of California. Many of you already know me and know the book club, but for those of you who don't know the Book Club of California, we are a nonprofit member and donor-supported organization that is dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes, we do that with a focus on the history and literature of California and the West. The book club publishes limited edition, finely made books. We have a scholarly journal called the Quarterly Newsletter, and we publish keepsakes for our members. We host a year-round series of exhibitions and programs in San Francisco, and now monthly here back in Southern California, on topics like fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, history, and much, much more. So if you're interested in what we do and you're not a member, you should consider joining the Book Club of California. Our dues are modest, but the benefits are many, and we simply can't do the work of the book club without the support of our members and our donors. So I encourage you to visit us online at bccbooks.org. And now for tonight's program. Enough of me. The program is titled Cut, Fold, and Repeat, a pop-up adventure with Matthew Reinhart. So our speaker is Matthew Reinhart. He's right over here. He'll be taking the podium in a second. Matthew studied toy design at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, before finding his calling as a pop-up book creator. His books include the best-selling Encyclopedia Prehistorica, Dinosaurs, Star Wars, a pop-up guide to the galaxy, Game of Thrones, a pop-up guide to Westeros, and Harry Potter, a pop-up guide to Hogwarts, among many other award-winning titles. He lives in Los Angeles, and I'm really just so delighted that he is here with us this evening and able to speak to you all. So please give him a warm round of applause and welcome to the podium.
Hi everyone. I speak pretty loudly. I don't know if I'll mute this too much, but I have an ego. I'm not using the microphone, right? Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, what I do. Oh, I make pop-up books. If you don't know, they're these, they have these huge pop-ups inside or whatever. Sometimes some of my pop-ups are not necessarily huge, but they may have sort of interactive action. So they're pretty intense. They're Spidey, doing like this. I've made a lot of books over the years. I know I've made over 50 in the last 21, 22 years. I work a lot, okay? So well, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got started. And well, I'll tell you. I'll sit over here.
This is why we use the printed page.
I know, exactly. I'm gonna sit right here and do this. All right. So, let's see. Is my thing responding? It's not even responding. Here we go. Let me just go in and show. And then all my secrets will come out to show everyone. Play from start. Let's see. There we go. Okay, there it is. All right, so let's see if I can do this now. Oh, I can. Cool. Now it works. Okay, so my dad was in the Navy. We lived all over the place. We moved a lot. And I was born in Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But my dad and my mom both wanted to get the hell out of there. And we lived all over the place, from Texas to California to, actually I lived for a year when I was in first grade in San Diego. And it was kind of like this magical year that I remember. It was so, beautiful, and it was, it was like 1977 or 1978, so it was post Star Wars. All of my life was sort of based around Star Wars. So, it was like this magical time. Everyone's in roller skates, it was just super cool. Anyways, we moved a lot, and making friends, as you move as a kid, it gets harder and harder as you get older. And I think my main friend growing up was my art. I was always making things, drawing, painting. I was always making stuff out of cardboard. And one of the main factors there's my little sister in the background. Anything I made that my sister, got her hands on usually got annihilated. There I am. So just a normal, kid in the 70s and 80s. I didn't collect pop-up books as a kid. In fact, I only had one, and this was it. It was a dinosaurs pop-up book. It had beautiful artwork. I got it after a surgery when I was a little kid, and I loved it because I love dinosaurs. But after about an hour, it looked like this. All right, all of the pop-ups were torn out of it, and I wonder why. So I didn't collect pop-up books. In fact, I didn't even really think about pop-up books. That's her. She's the same to this day. I didn't even think about pop-up books, growing up. It wasn't something that I made or even thought this was something I could be. In fact, the only pop-up book I had no pop-ups left in it. So it kind of just left my mind from when I was young, and I moved on, but I continued to make my art. In fact, this is a drawing I did in first grade in San Diego, actually. You can see that even back then, my ego was pretty big. I had a real big up at the top. And I love to look at the world through sort of rainbow sort of glasses, all these weird colored dinosaurs. I think the reason why I painted or markered these dinosaurs in this way is because some of the markers were running out. And so I was like, oh, I'm running out of the red, so I better start using the brown. It was super weird. This is a drawing I did in second grade for the church poster contest. I love drawing animals. I love biology and zoology. I love fruit creatures. And I just remember planning this all out, and like, I'm gonna have two, there's gonna be 2 flamingos and 2 camels. And I just had it all planned out. I was sure I was gonna win. But let me tell you, I did not even place because if you draw Jesus on a poster contest for a Christian or for a church, you always win. You always win. So didn't win, but it taught me to keep on going, keep on practicing, and eventually I did a Noah's Ark book. So yeah. So I was always doing artwork and making my own things, whether it was out of cardboard, paper, whatever. Growing up, I wasn't a very motivated teenager. Shock. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And at the time, we didn't have YouTube, and we didn't see that there were all these different things out there that you could be. So my parents really wanted me to be a doctor. My dad was an oral surgeon, and he said, we don't want to have to pay for you after, college. So, you really should think about a job going in that direction. So I went to Clemson University. We at the time lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and that's where they had sort of stationed him last. And so I went to Clemson University, and it was fine. I studied biology. I did real well, but I always had art classes on the side. I took sculpture and figure drawing all throughout, just to make myself happy. I enjoyed certain parts of biology and the science stuff. I did not enjoy like biochemistry, organic chemistry. That was horrible. Physics. Those were harder to me, but I did enjoy things like zoology, paleontology. I loved all those sort of things. I actually got into medical school after Clemson, but I took a year off and lived in New York City. And this is like 1994, 1995. I lived there. During that time, it was real tough to find a job. And there I am with my roommates. We lived on Canal Street. And at the time, Canal Street was like on the edge of Soho. I don't know if anyone knows New York very well, but we lived over a stereo store, okay? So during the day, the music was so loud downstairs, the furniture would vibrate. Sometimes it would move, you know, it was so loud. And we would have these rats that would gnaw through the cement of our walls that I swear were this big. So, you know, it was just like, it's New York, hey, just deal with it. You know, whenever you heard the rats running around, you always like throw a boot at it at night, you know. So it was a real fun experience. But when I was there, I realized like I didn't want to go through life and not pursue something that I really enjoyed. And, you know, going to med school just wasn't my thing. I actually, during that time period when I was in New York, I worked for what's called the iBank for site restoration. Now that's not a bank like money bank, that is a tissue procurement agency. So because I studied biology and I had some very good hand skills, I actually went to morgues and procured corneas and donor eyes for research and things like that. And the corneas were used for corneal transplants. So like, I took out dead people's eyeballs. It was super weird, but it made me realize that, you know, I didn't mind working with dead people, but like going to the hospitals and dealing with the living ones, it was just not gonna be for me. So, you know, I started doing research and finding out what I could do, something that I could apply my creative side. I was realistic about like, what can I use this creative side and you know, use it towards a job. So I convinced my parents, who were very supportive, shockingly. I convinced them that I wanted to go to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn and study industrial design. Now, you know, it says that I want to be a toy designer. Kevin said that was my main goal, but I was very open to all lines of products. So industrial design, you can design anything from like, you know, this podium here to, you know, cool Nike shoes or, you know, cars. I specifically want to go towards toys because I'm a huge toy collector. I collect action figures like Star Wars figures and Transformers, and I have like a massive collection of them. But anyways, I went to Pratt, and that was my grad years. I almost, you know, I took 2 years there, and really it gave me the confidence to take my artwork and my creative stuff and to be able to present it, you know, in a career. While I was, oops, I'm gonna have that. Now, once I got out of school, I actually worked at Nickelodeon for a short period on a show called Blue's Clues. And during that time, I was also freelancing with someone named Robert Sabuda. He does a lot of these amazing pop-up books. And you know, I was doing it and it was like, you know, this is kind of cool to do this on the side. I had a knack for it. But you know, I still wanted to go towards that toy route. There was a point where Robert said, I really need your help big time doing these projects. So I started to help him more and more. And during that time when I was helping him, I realized like maybe I could sell my own book. So I was able to start doing some of my own books, sometimes collaborating with him, sometimes, you know, doing my own thing. And so it started to grow and grow. One of the first books I did was the pop-up book of phobias, and it was a super weird book that I did not want to do. But you know, like when you're in the beginning of your career, you don't choose your projects, right? So it was super weird. And the other book that I did was the pop-up book of nightmares. And I worked with this weird artist, and but it was fun and it got some attention. From there, I was able to start doing more and more of my own projects. Let's see. Yeah, there they are. Pop-up book of nightmares. They're both out of print. Robert and I started. We did 2 books that did pretty well that were insect books. There was a Young Naturalist Guide to Butterflies, Young Naturalist Guide to Beetles. Those did well enough that we were able to get a deal to collaborate on a series of prehistoric books. And this is where like everything exploded. I did this dinosaur book. And when I collaborated with Robert, these books, our deal was between us, I would pretty much do everything. He would look over things a little, but like I had to write it, I had to engineer it, and I had to make the artwork. So I'm a paper engineer in that I design the actual pop-ups, and I'll show you that process in a bit. I also illustrate and I write as well. So these were really fun, but it was like, this is early in my career, I was thrown into the fire. You know, it's like, you got to do this, I'll help you when you need it, but you got to do it. And I was doing 2 big books like this a year. So it was like, you get thrown into the fire and let's hope you can get out, you know, let's hope you can survive it. And I thankfully did. I worked really, really hard. And so these books did very well. Dinosaurs, these are all still in print. And they released in like 2004, I think. So this one, I get people that act like young adults that say, I remember that when I had it, when I was a kid. And then it's just like, it is the most unnerving thing to hear an adult say to you. There's a little peek. When we made this book, I wanted to make sure that, you know, the T-Rex came out and bit you. Because that's, you know, that's what you want. You want to experience these creatures in certain ways. What's the fun way of experiencing something like that? I've done a number of different, like, sort of classic style books. I did my own version of Cinderella, nursery rhymes. Like I said, the Ark. I did a Noah's Ark back early in my career, and also the Jungle Book, based on the classic story. And so these were wonderful to be able to like sort of retell evergreen stories like this. I also did a series called Encyclopedia Mythologica. So I love research on stuff like this. I love research on mythology, ancient history, science. I love this kind of stuff. So these were really fun books to do. And this is when I really started to grow as a paper engineer and do some wild stuff. Like there's some amazing engineering in these books. And that was, I don't know what drugs I was on. I don't know what was happening, but there's some really wild stuff in here, especially like I don't have a picture of it, but there is a pop-up of the Argo, which is, you know, Jason and the Argonauts ship. And there's this the way that I was inspired to make the sail from the ship based on, have you ever folded a piece of paper to make one of those fans? That's the way it opens and closes on there. So I don't know where that came from, and that's sometimes what happens when I'm designing something. I may see something, the way something is folded, the way something moves, and it inspires me. The other thing is this dragon. You can see it actually has tissue paper on its body that composes its body, and that's inspired by, you know, those tissue paper garlands that you put up for parties. And actually, you know, because we were nearby Chinatown, every Chinese New Year, they would have these big cool dragons that were made out of like those sort of garlands that were up for decorations. And I thought, I want to make that open in a pop-up book. What I loved about that mechanism in particular was it makes a sound when it opens. And it's just the sound of crinkling paper that opens. But there's just, even pop-ups can have sound, they can have timing, they can have all of these things. I just love that. You know, there's kind of a whispering, like it's, you know, like it's stretching across the sky. So I loved doing these books. They were a lot of fun. And there's Osiris, Anubis, excuse me, Anubis, with the wedge, someone's wedge it, or not wedge it, in his hand. Can't remember. I'm not real good with remembering all my research over the years. I was able to work with Marty Sendak, a friend of mine, on this book called Mommy. It was a super weird book, because he was super weird, and but he was great. A funny anecdote about this book in particular, when we started it, he goes, Matthew, don't worry, I'm really fast at making artwork, okay? So don't worry, it's not going to take that long. It took him 4 years to finish the artwork. But in the end, it turned out really, really great. He was always telling me during it, oh, I'm totally effing up this. I'm totally effing up the art. I'm totally messing it up. And he wasn't. It was great. So he was fun to work with, and I miss him. So Star Wars was a really important creative experience to me. You know, growing up, I grew up on the movies. I played with the toys. I read the books. I read the comic books. I pored over the making of books. I love to see the developmental drawings that the artist did to come up in the models and everything. I think that's what inspired me as a kid the most. I was able to do, well, I actually done 3 Star Wars books since. But the first one, Pop-Up Guide to the Galaxy, was the #1 New York Times bestseller, had 2 light-up lightsabers in it. That book would cost $200 now to make, or maybe a little less, but it was amazing to be able to create, because I actually got to go do research at the Lucas Ranch, and I did a second one for the prequels, not as popular. And that one was fun to do too. So the Darth Vader pop, you can actually see Anakin for a few seconds before the helmet goes over his face. Here are the light up lightsabers. This one is unfortunately out of print. We're working on getting it back in print. So good luck getting it on the eBays. You can get one. I've done a couple of superhero books. I just showed off this Marvel one that I think it's coming out next week. Or this week, I think. It's just coming out. And my first superhero book was DC Comics Superheroes. That one was super fun to do. There's a huge battle of the heroes and villains at the end of the book, and it's like this huge pop. And there's 50 different characters, all together in a typical sort of comic book way. I love comic books. They were the books that I probably read first when I was young. I loved pictures. I wasn't a big reader. I think I was a little daunted by just the words on the page. I needed those pictures every once in a while to get me used to reading the longer books. So comic books were the way my gateway drug into books. I did a book a few years ago for the Game of Thrones. Now I love this show, and I love that beginning part of the show where you go through the map that sort of opens and it's a mechanical sort of thing. This book, the reason why this is a book that it doesn't do this on its own. You got to do it. This book is actually this is the first one I did where the book becomes something else. The reason was they wanted me to make a book that just showed off the castles and things of Game of Thrones, which I was like, that's stupid. Why can't we show characters and stuff? And they go, oh, we can't show characters because we don't have we don't have the rights to the likenesses. So I'm like, how can you do a book about Game of Thrones without their pictures? Well, we figured it out. So it was the first time that we made one that it became something else. I've done a few books like this since. Actually, I just finished a Dungeons and Dragons book that the whole book becomes a map as well. This was the first one. And I also did ones similarly. And I just like the idea of a book becoming something else. Oopsie. This is, okay, let's see if this one starts. This one, for some reason, the GIF isn't moving. But this is my third Star Wars book. It also opens up into a giant, sort of wild Star Wars map. And it takes you, it's like a map of the entire Star Wars story. It's really fun. I love Disney animation. I grew up with it, as being, those were the big, moments when you grow up and go, or as you're growing up and you'll see those movies in the theater. So I never stopped loving animation. And when Disney calls and says, will you do the Frozen book? I said yes before they finished the word Frozen. And I also did a Disney Princess book. I love Disney Princess, the different animations. Especially my favorite is Little Mermaid. I loved that movie. It was really funny. It was great. The music was great. So working on a book like that was super fun. Just a little secret. When I was working on this book, I was also secretly helping a friend who was working on the Walking Dead, that zombie show. I was secretly working on that in the background. So the same day I was working on Cinderella turning into a beautiful princess, I was also doing a zombie's head being blown off. So every time I look at this, I'm like, ooh, that's spooky. In 2015, I was able to work on a Lego pop with the folks at Lego, and I was able to visit the headquarters in Billund in Denmark. And I had a great time. They're very picky people to work with. But it was a lot of fun. This one has one of the tallest pop-ups I've ever made. It's this huge tower It's about this tall. And that was my assistant dressed up as a Ninjago character. Again, more Disney books. This is the Pixar Pop-Up Celebration. It has miniature pops of every single, almost every Pixar movie. I also did A Nightmare Before Christmas, one of my favorite movies of all time. And because I loved the style of the movie. I loved, it was just great. So to be able to work on that book, to be able to illustrate it and make pop-ups for it was just, wow, amazing dream come true. A little video of it. And I like to make pop-ups that have transforming moments within it. So there it is. It's one thing and then it becomes something else. Also did a number of Harry Potter books. I'm actually working right now on a new Harry Potter book, but this is the first one, the Pop-Up Guide to Hogwarts, and it's another one of those map books. So you can see all the different parts of the Hogwarts and the Forbidden Forest, and also Hogsmeade, and it becomes this giant map. But then it's also like an introduction to the Harry Potter world. So love those stories, love those movies. And my most recent one is the Marvel superheroes pop. And this was like a couple years in the making because of COVID, and it was so much fun. I worked with 3 different comic book artists. Sometimes I make the art, sometimes other people make the art. So I work between those 2 things. And it's fun to write and stage all the pop-ups and then have these other artists come in with their amazing artwork and have it come to life. So this one was amazing. And I also have recently gotten back into doing more nonfiction. So this is my first one that I've done called Teeth, Tentacles, and Tail Fins. That's a lesson in being careful about what you title a book. That was actually my joke title. I named like 4 or 5 different titles. I wanted it to be called like Savaged, Ocean. I wanted to, because sharks are scary and savage monsters, and they're like, it's a little intense, So they made me come up with a few other names, and this was the joke name. Of course, they came back and said, "Oh, Barnes and Noble loves that name. That's the name we should go with." So, so that with Teeth, Tentacles, and Tail Fins, I have a little hard time too. The new one I'm working on in this series of nonfiction books is called Paws, Claws, and Snapping Jaws. So that one I like better. It has a little more, and that's Rainforest Predators. So I'm working on that right now. As usual, I'm always late. So let me tell you a little bit about how I make pop-ups. What I do is I take a bunch of paper, I stick it in the pop-up factory machine, and out comes a pop-up book, and that's it. And that's why I'm special. I didn't hear talking about it. Yeah, I wish. So how do I make a pop-up book? Well, it all starts from the idea and the concepts and the research. And someone comes to me with a concept and says, or I come up with one. I want to do a book about this. Okay, what's going to be on each page? How many pages is it? How many pops? What's going to be big? What's going to be small? Whatever. That's kind of how I take it through a book. Usually, I don't like to draw a picture of what I'm going to make on the page because it limits me, or it's something I can't make because it's too deep. So I don't like to do it, but sometimes when I work with licensors at times, and I hate to use that term, but like if I'm working with Disney, sometimes they may have people who can't visualize what I'm thinking will be the pop-up. So you have to draw pictures. I love doing research when I can. Then we start thinking about the manuscript. Sometimes I sketch just ideas about characters or whatever early on in the process, just to get the mood for things. So like I said, I do research. I don't know why I put this one here. This is me at Lucas Ranch doing research back in like 2006. I was so happy. You can see I'm much younger. I was so happy to see this is all Star Wars props. And at the time, this was before Disney took over. So it was just in a crappy warehouse. Like, it was so incredible to see that stuff. Those are actual lightsabers that my editor and those are stunt lightsabers. And they're just like sticks with the lightsaber part at the end, and they later on would put the light up part on it. It was really fun. So anyways, I don't know why that picture was there. It was out of order, but that was my research picture. So there are times when I'm working on the outline for a book and what we might, focus on, and I'll put pictures, and this is for, my editor or, or my publisher, just to give them an idea of what we might focus on for the book. And then I actually get, once I know those concepts, then I actually get started cutting and folding paper. I don't use a computer program to do the initial design. It's all by hand, so I use a lot of cardstock. Just so if you want to know, I use 110-pound cardstock typically. I usually in white, just because it's easy for me to see the sculpture of what I'm making. So I use a lot of that, and it's easy to buy. I use a lot of tape. I use artist tape, a lot of scissors, cutting tools, glue, X-Acto knife, and Band-Aids, lots of Band-Aids. I don't cut myself as much as I used to. But I mean, in the beginning, it's just me cutting and folding paper and making a mess in my work studio. So in the beginning, like a pop-up like that dinosaur, it might look like something like this. I may sketch on it a little, but most of the time it's just, paper that's sort of, I'm figuring out how it all works, how it all looks. It may be smaller, then I may work smaller. Anymore, I always work to size, just because I want the paper to act the way it's supposed to. If you make something really small and then blow it up, that paper is not going to act the same way as it did at that small size. So I try to stay at a larger size, or true size. So I roughly work out things, and then what I do is I carefully take apart the pop-up, mark where all the things are attached, and trace the pieces, and I make what are called die lines. And I used to, back in the old days, use tissue paper and pencil and straight edges and rulers to trace all those pieces to make the die lines, and then I Xerox them and onto cardstock and rebuild them. I don't need to do that anymore. I scan the pieces and I make digital die lines in Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. I trace the pieces and I rebuild it. Some of the pop-ups that I make, and you can see this is a much more refined one. You can actually see that there are even notes and numbers on the different pieces for this one. So it's much more refined. And there's also small little flaps here that are added in that have miniature pop-ups inside. I'm known for, like, usually have a big pop and there's small ones on the side or something, Less so these days because it's more expensive to do that. Pop-up books have become more expensive. But that's usually what we do for these kind of books. So I'll refine it. Sometimes I'll have to rebuild this pop-up, a number of times. For example, I did a Transformers book about 10 years ago, and I had to rebuild that Optimus Prime, which actually transformed. I spoke 20 times. I mean, it was just, I could not, sometimes you just have to do that. You have to refine the mechanisms. Oops, and that's what I think. Oh, that's fine. So these are just initial rough pops, just by hand. I just built this by hand, and I'm testing it. Apparently, when princesses get ready for parties, not only do they get their dress gets bigger, but also their hair gets bigger. This was a really fun, but like that's I like to play. Like I'm playing. Now the other one on the other side is more complex. That was the first version of a pop-up transformer that I was able to make. So you can see like it's roughly a car shape. It's all in white just to kind of get an idea of how it will work. And then make sure to get it flat. And then you can see that it becomes a full 3D transformer. Now I didn't even use that one. And you can see I drink a lot of diet caffeinated drinks. This is a pop-up, an early prototype. I'm just messing around with paper, right? Of this horse. I wanted to make a horse that was jumping over. This was for an unpublished Sleeping Beauty project. And so there she is, and I've added people in the back. It's the same top. You can see all that paper everywhere. And I'm just cutting and folding paper and seeing how it all works together. I love the two characters on the back really give it so much movement. I actually went and studied horses a little to see, now horses don't really jump quite that extreme, but sometimes you have to be, pushing over the edge. And I'm just using a few different mechanisms all working at once to make that. So that's how I start off. Then the next step is actually making a sketch prototype or a sketch dummy. And that has like actual sketches in it and on the pop-ups to show what, this is to give to the editor and the publisher so they can see what the entire book looks like. So this sometimes has the text in it, but this will be an entire book that's been put together. This was for my Gods and Heroes book, and this is Mount Olympus. And you can see there's a color version at the bottom over there. These are initial prototypes for the Harry Potter book. We just sketched in some work here. We wanted to, I don't know, that's Hermione, and we had to do the 3 characters. She's kind of showing that she's in 3 places at once because she's doing her time turner. And then poor Ron, he's throwing up slugs into a bucket. They didn't let us do this, which is unfortunate. But I love the way the bucket is round, and he's just like, he would have had his body there as well, but behind it. But this was just to illustrate, like, oh, he vomits up slugs. I just thought it was so funny. I'm working on this book now. I'm working on another Harry Potter. I'm gonna try to get this in. Because I thought that was funny. Oh wait, and let's see. Oops, did I push the wrong? Did I push the button? There we go. And the bottom one isn't turning on for some reason. So the bottom was the one that was actually ended up being in the book. So, those 2 are the same ones. And then I had to change it because they wanted Ron to look more heroic. So we just threw something in there because I was like in such a bad mood about changing it. So here's like the initial sort of like very nicely, this was actually using die lines. So this is pretty close to the end. And then sometimes I'll have sketches around things, just have an idea about what might go in the backgrounds. And then that's what it ended up looking like with the actual art. This artwork was done, this artwork was made as cut paper collage art. Because I cut pop-ups to cut paper to make pop-ups, I like to cut paper to make the artwork. That's just one of the styles of art I do, but it worked really well for this title. This is me working in the studio very fast with lots of caffeine. No, just like cutting and folding paper. Sometimes there's a plan and sometimes there isn't. Like sometimes I'll have an idea for how a mechanism will work, but usually I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. And so I was tracing the pieces, and then maybe I'm sketching and deciding maybe painting in the computer to add in the color under the die line so that I know how big the pieces are being, and then testing it out. I don't remember how long this pop made how long it took to make that pop. I think it was like a day. I already knew how, that was for the Transformer book. That was just I didn't actually use that pop-up that was shown me making. That was just to show how I would do it. But anyways, so you can see the process. Now, it can take me anywhere from, I may be able to design something in a few hours that is big and that works well. And other times, I may be stuck and it may take me a couple of weeks to do something. It just depends. I try not to linger on that design that I'm stuck with. Like for example, I'm working on this Harry Potter Creatures book, and I had to make Dobby the elf. And I wanted to make him pop up, be big and cool, but I also wanted him to be able to have a pull tab on him so you could make something happen, pull a sock out of the book. So that's the whole thing. And like if Dobby gets a sock, then he's free. So so if he gets if his master gives him clothing, so if he gets in the movie, he gets a sock. He's like, I'm free, So I had to do that. But I was stuck for a while with it, and I had to and I had my editor going, where is that? I want to see it. I gotta see it. And I was like, you can't rush art, man. But I had to do other stuff. You should have seen the look on her face when I told her you can't rush art. I thought she was like, what the hell are you talking about? But I had to do something else because I was like blocked, but I wasn't blocked for another project. So I just, kind of, it depends. I'm faster now than I was when I was younger. And I have a greater range of like sort of things that I've done that I know of. So this is the sketch prototype that I did for Transformers. So you can see like it's all kind of sketched in with pencil. Sometimes I'll draw it even better than that. Sometimes I'll do it in color if I'm in a good mood, if I have time. But this was just rough. I remember being behind schedule. I think I cried before this one and turned this in because it was so hard. Everything in this transformed. So like there's a planet that turns into like a big battle on Earth. There's, you know, all these cars, you pull a tab and they turn into a robot. So it was pretty cool. Sometimes I work with other artists. And when I've done that, okay, so I've made the pop-up design, the initial one, right? Then I've traced it, made the die lines, and then I've made a sketch prototype. So the next stage is actually making the color artwork. I always have the art comes after the paper engineering in my world, because I look at it like this. Pop-up, the mechanism itself is the cape, and the color on top, that's a frosting. Now, I love frosting, don't get me wrong. I love it. In fact, I get a whole bucket of frosting. But for me, when I'm making the pop-ups, we've got to get that structure right first. Then we can make the artwork around it. So there are times when I work with other artists, and I have to make what are called artist guides for that art. Because if I gave an artist, like imagine this in white, if I gave them this in white or the pieces in white and said, fill them in, they would kill me. You know, like they would know, I never give artists die lines, never, because that would scare the shit out of them. And they wouldn't know, that's a cruel thing to do. So what I do is I make artist guides. I'll roughly sketch out things, tell them how they need to make it. Oh, this arm needs to be in a separate layer than this arm or whatever, so that I can separate them out and put them back together as pop-up pieces. Because sometimes when you see a pop-up, you may see the back of the head, you might see the front of the head, you may need to, you know, so I'm very particular about that. And I want them to feel comfortable about making the art. I don't want them to be scared. So I'm always like taking people by the hand. Oh, okay, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna do this, it's gonna be great. And I try to make it as easy as I can. Because they have to make the character or whatever separate from the background. Because if they just made it flat, just like this, there'd be an outline in the background of that character. And that would, you know, then I would have to do all kinds of Photoshop stuff, and I don't want to do that. So I'll give them artist guides. These are the die lines. And after they've sent back that artwork, I will chop it up in Photoshop and I will place everything with the die lines. So that's the die lines. I don't show them those. And then I take their artwork that usually comes back, it's usually digital. And then I can, you know, chop it up and place everything just right. Sometimes I have to fix things. I've learned how to use Photoshop so well at this point. And I've learned working with other artists is actually amazing because you learn how they do things. And it's been really inspiring to see, you know, when you get back beautiful artwork, it's just like so cool. This is, for example, this is like the rough sketches for, just the artist guides for the Marvel superheroes. And I, you know, like you can see that I want the head separate from the body. And even though he isn't exactly in this position, he's actually has more of the body, he's bent. This was the easiest way for me to describe to the artist how to draw it. And then, of course, you have to draw back Spider-Man as well. And I had to explain, like, the back of the hand, when it's turned like this, should be the exact same shape, but reversed. You know what I mean? So if I, you know, like your hand like this is gonna be the same, like, you know, whatever. It's gotta be the same shape on both sides. So you have to explain that to the artist. Sometimes people don't get that. And here you can see I chopped up the artwork. It would be impossible for her to have drawn it like that, you know, in those shapes, and to explain that to somebody. It would be impossible. So it's easier for me to tell them, draw it close to a single thing, and then I will put them all together. Sometimes I make the artwork myself. I do cut paper collage. I have like all these papers that we made in the studio. And, sometimes it's by hand, sometimes it's digital. Let's see. So when I'm doing cut paper, or when I do my own, I usually do the sketch first. And sometimes I do it in pencil. Now I work a lot on in Photoshop. I can just draw directly into the computer. I have a machine called a Cintiq, which is basically like a screen that you can draw directly on, because I like to see that I can't look at it. I can't work with a mouse or work with a tablet and not have to see the ink coming out of my pencil. So when I work, I like to see, to draw like that. So if I do this, I'll draw digitally or with pencil. This is like my map. And then I will make copies of it and cut out sections using that drawing as my sort of map, and also sort of cut out sections from different color paper, glue it together. Sometimes I work really, really small, and for a small piece of art like that, there might be 20 pieces all glued together to make a very simple piece of art like this shark on the cover of this book. Excuse me. Let's see here. There's a shark. There we go. This is the cover of the Dragons and Monsters book, and this dragon here is all cut paper collage. This is the initial sketch. It's a Japanese dragon. It's a mean dragon. It says up top. And my editor said, "Could you tone down mean?" So fixed that, made it a little bit different. And this is like a piece that's about this big, and it's probably about 300 different pieces of paper glued together. I did this in about a day and a half. And it's all cut paper. You'll notice that there's something there is a coil. Well, I guess the tail goes down like that, but there should be a little bit there. But what are you gonna do? I pick apart my work. This is cut paper collage done digitally, not this fast. This is just showing like how all the layers stack up. So I'll do drawing, and then I'll start doing layers, and I have a lot of my paper scanned into the computer, and I'll do different layers. And what's interesting about doing cut paper collage this way is you can get a lot of really fun, different kinds of layers in there, and you make some really subtle cuts and things. So I enjoyed this for what it was on this project. For when you do Disney books, you have to be real. You have to get your character models on point. But it was really, I learned so much working on that book. So, like I said, after I've made all those different pieces, then I assemble the die lines and the artwork. And at the end of making a project, I have to make one beautiful color prototype in order to give that, so that the publisher can see what it looks like, can see where all the text goes. And then I also have to make one for the manufacturer. So there has to be a perfect, production dummy or production prototype so that they can use that to follow to make thousands of times over. So I'll assemble all the die lines with the artwork. Those are digital files. Those will go along with a couple of copies that I've handmade, usually just one, the handmade version, so that they can copy what I've done. I have to be done with my work usually about 9 to 10 months before it actually releases. And I'm working with the manufacturer throughout that entire period, back and forth. Shit, here's a prototype. What do you think of it? You look at it and you go, you built this wrong, you built this wrong, you built this wrong. And my books are usually manufactured in Thailand or in China. And so I've learned, you have to be very specific and visual when someone else is speaking a different language or not speaking English in the same way that you do. So I'm always very visual with this is the reason why this is. I never, ever expect someone understands what I'm saying. So I always try to point things out. I make videos now, it's great. I can talk with them directly and show them things because we have Zoom and everything. So it's actually kind of great now because we can directly speak with people a lot easier. So it's a long process. This is going to show you, it's a weird video, but it's going to show you kind of the process of everything and then go into production and manufacturing. So this is for the Star Wars book. This is me a long time ago, no, just a few years ago, and in my studio in New York, explaining like the process. So that's a preliminary, that's what we saw, that's the initial sort of sketch prototype. Take it apart, make the die lines, adding in the color, and then this all goes to manufacture. So this is printing. This is a giant printing press, it's about as big as a bus, and so it's going to print all the pieces onto these big sheets of paper called nesting sheets. So you can see how big they are. And each book might have like 3 or 4 nesting sheets total. Next step is die cutting. And so they'll press the different nesting sheets onto the die, and they'll punch out all the pieces and they'll stack them up, and they'll make sure all of them are in place. The next part is sort of the assembly line of assembling the book, and they're highly skilled hand assembly technicians or whatever that are building the book. You can see they actually have like glue with like a little brush at the end, whatever. So each person is doing a different portion of the book and handing it off to the next person. And it's a long process. They oftentimes will figure out better ways to assemble things or make things, and then they'll contact me and we'll change the way it is, because I always listen to my team in the manufacturing plant because they know what they're doing. But they're all highly skilled workers. So that's how a pop-up book is sort of assembled. Once they are finished assembling each of the spreads, they glue them all together, press them, they put the cover on the book. And again, it is pressed and dries, and then they're packed up, and then they're sent off into shipping containers and distributed throughout the world. And we have to, of course, be finished many, many months before the book actually is on the shelves. And sometimes, right now, at least, it's still distribution is taking longer and longer. So sometimes we hope that the book is going to be out on its publishing date, but sometimes they miss it. Now we're getting back to normal though, so it's cool. My books have been translated into many languages all over the world, and it makes me very proud that these creations it started out as something I made in my hands that goes from my hands to everyone, the manufacturers, their hands, and then goes out to readers' hands all over the world. Makes me very proud as an artist to be able to share, and very happy because I want to share the joy that I get from making it. I love sharing that with other people. So it's really rewarding as an artist. And even though sometimes right now, I sometimes I sound exhausted from the work that I'm doing because there's just so much happening right now. I really do love what I do, and I'm very happy to do it. So that's about it. That's me. Does anyone have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
How many individual pieces of paper might there be in a book?
It could depend. For something like this book, which is fairly complicated, there might be at least like 200 to 250 different pieces. I didn't count. I stopped counting a while back. There were some books, oh God, like this Dungeons and Dragon book, this book is $50, I think. And the Dungeons and Dragon book is like 75. That has a 300. There's just so many. Maybe 250. I just don't count anymore. But it depends. Like I am limited. Price points are limited on books, and I have to think about that more. You're like, oh, I'm an artist, man. I want as much as I can. But they may say that this is too expensive, maybe we need to knock out a pop, or maybe we need to make this simpler, make this more complicated. So I'm always listening to what my, because in the end, it's a product, we have to sell them. Those things may change. Some books, I'm limited by the amount of paper and the glue points that go into making it. Now, it's a tricky thing. Glue points are not glue points. They're not the points where you glue. Like, it makes sense, right? Glue points are actions. So anytime you fold this, push it through, and glue it. That's 3 glue points. So like those 3 actions are what, so I have to be thoughtful about, there needs to be this many actions to make this pop. And I usually try not to pay attention to it, but there are certain projects where I sort of have a rough gauge of how complicated something should be and how much it should not. So, because right now, I just started having my own imprint. So at my publisher, Inside Editions, which is in San Francisco, actually in Somerville, outside of San Francisco. I also have a small imprint with Abrams Books, beautiful books as well, for board books for very, very young, pre-K kids. So board books, they're more square and heavier duty books. So I have these 2 different sort of lines. And my new imprint with Insight has a broad range of pop-up products and paper craft products. We just started doing paper craft like books, like make DIY paper craft books. So there may be a couple pop-ups, and there's like paper figure, there's like, different fun stuff. So I just did a Harry Potter paper craft that just came out. And now I'm working on Pokemon paper crafts. And let me tell you, those Pokemon people, they are intense, okay? Like, you see those cute little creatures, and you think like, wee, it's fun. Not them. I mean, they make Disney look like a walk in the park, like it's nothing, but Disney people actually, they're so much fun and really easy to work with. But like, I love doing all the like stretching beyond the stuff I usually do. We're just doing a broad range of different things. It's not just like the big pop-up book, smaller books. We're doing, we're doing like a Christmas wreath that you can display. We're doing, we just did a nativity that you can display as well. So we're trying to go beyond just that book and make other types of pop-up products. So it's fun. It's very, but it's hard because I'm only one person. I have a couple of helpers. And I occasionally work with other paper engineers, like, in different places. It's a small world of paper engineers. I usually train somebody for a while to get them kind of up to speed. But I'll be honest, like as an artist, like I don't like someone in my space all the time. I used to have full-time people. I can't take it. Like I need a day off, so I usually have part-time workers. That works best for me. Yes?
In book part of your career, did you ever do any research as to techniques used years earlier, your predecessors?
Oh, do I do research about like what other pop-up people do? Sure. We all begin from looking at what other people do and copying it. I mean, but not copying it, but how far back do I go? Well, if I saw something that was 200 years old that was really cool, I would find out a way to make that and see what they did to like everybody. We learning this. You start from some basics, and if you go to like I'm not trying to push my YouTube channel, and I've been really bad this year. I'm sorry, but I haven't done a lot of videos this year because we moved and I got this imprint, and it's just hard to do videos. But I did this series called the Pop-Up Masterclass, and you teach the basics, those rules. You learn these basic rules like B-folds and layers, and you learn these basic rules in the beginning, and then I feel like you learn the rules and then you learn how to break them, or you learn how to push them in new directions, and then you build on that, and then you learn even more. So I always feel like I'm learning something new as I'm moving through this art form, or if I'm not, I look at what other people are doing, like, ooh, that's an interesting way that they did that. maybe that sparks something. So we're always kind of, I mean, all art is in a way, you know, you're learning from something else or being inspired by something else. But we do, there were some things in the beginning of my career that I definitely looked at what other people did and to learn. That's how you do it. That book, figure that out.
So computer.
There are a couple that I've heard of. There's not one, there's something about you don't have gravity in the computer, you don't have how the paper reacts to each other. Because sometimes you can think that something rubbing one piece of paper rubbing across another isn't gonna, if they aren't gonna hit or they aren't gonna, because you get that a lot where it's like, oh shit, you know, like one little thing will hit and the whole thing doesn't work. There is something about it being in the real world where you see how all these things go together. You don't know if that paper is gonna sag a little, and when it sags, it hits something else. And I'm always worried about like, oh, how these things gonna all, you're always worried about how all these things are converging together. So there are programs, but it doesn't quite match, you know, reality. Yes.
You know, had kind of a slowdown on and having good books out there, good pop-up books out there. And I was wondering if you have any, you know, aside from the expenses going on, is there something you like? What's the reason?
The reasoning, there's a lot of hand assembly that goes into this, why it's so expensive. And you know, there's not many bookstores out there, you know, so you know, things go up in price. But like everything is, you know, like the action figures that I used to buy, like action figures, the action figures that used to cost $8 cost $25 now, you know, because there's licensing fees, there's this, there's that, you know, like all this stuff, all the paint apps that go onto it. And you think about all the different things that the hand assembly that goes into, there's so many things in the world that are hand assembles that we don't even realize. We think they're robots, we think there's a machine that does that. There's some person who is working and sewing all the fabric on this thing and then hand it off to the next person and putting it together. So, you know, that's, I think one of the reasons, that's the main reason why, I think. So, and some books cost more than others just because, like I said, licensing. If you work with Star Wars, with Disney, there is a certain point that, you know, it's gonna cost a little more because you're working with those people. But it is mainly that hand assembly. It's always going on. Yes.
What's your dream project? There's a market, there's funding, you can do it.
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of, I'm really lucky. I had a lot of dreams come true. Star Wars was my first #1, or dinosaurs actually, because I loved dinosaurs growing up, and I still love them. I want to do a body book. I want to do, I really like, and I know I'm going to probably do one, but it won't be the body book I really want because there will be some restraints. Like I would love to do like an elaborate, like super incredible high-end body book. That would be amazing. I would love to do a book about the 7 wonders of the ancient world and Egypt. I love ancient history. I don't like recent history. I don't care about 300 years ago. I like 2,000 years ago. I don't, you know, I don't want to mess around with America. I want to go elsewhere. I want to see these fabulous places that we can't see anymore, you know? And I always love any sort of animals when you can create that kind of stuff. So those are like some of the big ones. Oh, I also love, my latest thing is Rick and Morty. I don't know if you can watch that cartoon. It's super weird. I love Rick and Morty. I want to do a Rick and Morty book somewhere, and I know I'll be able to. So, because I think they're weird and they would dig this. So if it was the right sort of strange book, that they would dig it. So yeah, I got a lot of dreams. I got a lot of them. It's always something. Anyone else? Thank you so much.
Wait, one more question. Do you have one more question?
Well, I was just gonna say, how do we tune into your event?
Oh, okay. So it's with Insight Editions. I think it's insighteditions.com. And it should, that's where my, you know, it's Reinhart Pop-Up Studio. And so that's where that is. The first books have come out this summer and fall. There's a Stranger Things book. There's this shark one or whatever, teeth, teeth and tentacles and all that. There is Christmas Nativity, there's a bunch of stuff there. So that, and next year's gonna be the same. Just a lot next year. I'm just so like the Harry Potter creatures, so it's always, I have a YouTube channel and there's all kinds of, like if you want to do like pop-up crafts, you want to learn about pop-ups in a more like from scratch sort of way, you can go and there's a pop-up masterclass. But if you want to like make something from a template that exists, it's easier to do. I've got a ton of stuff on there. So it's all yours, download it and build it, whatever. I'll be back on YouTube soon, hopefully after the holidays. Yeah, so that's the best place.
Have most of that information, those
Oh,
links,
yeah.
those websites. So if you email me, I'm happy to send you all of those things. So you don't have to go searching on your own for it. So again, big round of applause, a big thank you to Matthew Reinhart. And a big thank you to you for joining us here this evening and for coming to this Book Club of California program. It's so great to see people again in person at book club events. So thank you. Our next program is actually next Monday and it's in San Francisco, but we are going to be streaming it online on Zoom. So if you want to participate, you can. It's the publication launch for the book club's 242nd book, The Thunderbolt and the Monk. So if you're interested in what that's all about, I have some prospectuses up here on the table for you. Our next Southern California program, as I told you, is going to be Wednesday, December 14th here at the Glynn House. It's the Kenneth Carmiole Endowed Lecture, and it's titled The Surprising Legacy of Alice Parsons Millard, Antiquarian Bookseller and Champion of Beauty and Taste, a Pasadena area hero that many of you may know about. It's going to be an illustrated talk by author, historical consultant, and retired research librarian, Charles Nelson Johnson. You can register for that program or any of our programs online at bccbooks.org/programs or using the links in any of the emails that you're probably getting from the Book Club of California now. Register for anything you want to and we'll get to see you virtually or in person. Again, thanks for being with us. It's great to see you. I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great night and take care.